Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cheryl Ehrman. I'm the Dean of the College of Engineering. And today it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Caroline Dowling. Is it Caroline or Carolyn?
Caroline.
Caroline Dowling, President of Communications and Enterprise Computing at Flex International, also known as Flextronics. Ms. Dowling is a graduate of the Harvard Business School Advanced Management Program. Before joining Flex, she worked for the DII Group, where she held various management roles of increasing responsibility, including Vice President of Europe, Director of European Business, and Original Equipment Manufacturer Manager. Flex acquired the DII Group in 2000, and Ms. Dowling began her executive career with them as a Senior Vice President of Global Sales. In her 16 years with Flex, she's led divisions such as Novo, Corporate Strategy, and the Retail and Service divisions. Currently, she leads Flex Communications and Enterprise Computing Business Group, CEC, which is a $9 billion group comprised of an international team focused on product design, manufacturing, and services. Additionally, she's responsible for managing Flex's Global Service and Solutions, which is a $1 billion business unit, including forward and reverse logistics, spare parts management, and end-to-end global distribution. So once again, please help me welcome Ms. Caroline Dowling, President of Communications and Enterprise Computing at Flex.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We'll try again. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm Irish. I talk a lot. We're a country of bards, which would be all about poetry and art. I come from a family of musicians. So my husband plays the saxophone, my son plays the drums, my daughter plays the piano, my other son plays the guitar, and I am completely useless in their world. But what I do show up with, I volunteer to manage the money. So that is our background. So I have been working internationally for most of my career. I've been with Flex, formerly Flextronics, for about 20 years, come next February, 21 years next February. And as such a lovely introduction, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all. I actually will really enjoy it. I'm hoping we get some time for Q&A so we can have some engaging discussion, because it allows me to learn a little bit about what you're thinking and a little bit about what we could potentially do together at Flex. So San Jose State University and Flex are friends for many years. There's a number of students that have gone through our innovation labs over in Milpitas that have worked in our headquarters, and we're pretty excited about this engagement and would hope that our relationship will continue to evolve and we will get to work together. I prepared a presentation today, and it's meant to maybe just give you an intro into the world. So who am I? I'm a daughter. I'm now an orphan. So we buried my father a few years ago, and my mother died when she was young. And my uncle came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Now I'm 50 years of age, so picture this. I'm 50 years of age, and he said, dear Caroline, I'm so sorry. And my father had a peaceful passing, which I'm grateful for. And he said, you're an orphan now. And I'm going, really? I'm an orphan now at 50 years of age. But I'm a daughter, and I'm a mother. I have 3 children. I'm a grandmother. We have our firstborn. She's gorgeous, baby Elle, who we adore. And her name is Elbrana, which is a Gaelic name, which I won't get into too much explaining. I'm also a team leader. I'm a friend. And I believe in family and the importance of family in most everything I do. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my experience growing up and your experience growing up. I had my first daughter when I was way too young to be having children. I was 16 years of age. I dropped out of school. When my daughter went to school, her first day at school, I also had a uniform on, and I went back to school. And I dropped her off in the morning, went to school, she went to school, I picked her up in the evening, we went home. I cleaned houses and we repaired curtains, and that's how we got ourselves together. And when she was 13, I met my now husband. And we went on. We have 2 lovely boys, and Sarah's just had her first baby 6 months ago. But that journey teaches you an awful lot about yourself. It teaches you about when you're knocked over, what do you do next? And of course, we all get into a position where it can become very hard. And what I do reflect on and what I learned growing up is when you're 3, 4, 5, and 6 and you're in the kindergarten years and the preschool years, just entering into the school, every family kind of looks the same. By the time you get to the teenage years, you start to notice differences. You think your family are completely normal, which I'm sure all of them are. You go to your friend's family and they're somewhat different, and you start noticing little nuances about how a daddy interacts with his family, or a mom interacts with his family, or a grandparent, and so on and so forth. My learning for that, and the reason I'm bringing you through that journey, is where you're at today. Your background is irrelevant. Where you've come from is actually irrelevant. You may come from an extraordinarily privileged environment. You may come from an environment where you're working 3 jobs to put yourself through this university. But don't let it absolutely take all the good learnings from that, nurture them, and take them forward into what becomes you. And I was very deliberate about the little butterfly here. We were talking about caterpillars and how the butterfly, you can transform and evolve from anything. And we've seen families transform and evolve from lots of things. And I think for you, the youth and the future of the United States, you can have such a powerful place where you can influence what we do with technology in a very positive way. Technological experiences and advances, we have to be so responsible about what we do and how we choose to use them. And you're all in here going to be the women and men that will actually influence those decisions. And let's make sure we make those decisions responsibly together. So I love this quote, by the way. I think expect one of the questions we should ask ourselves is not what we would do if we had more time, means, influence, and educational advantages. What are you going to do with what you have right now? This opportunity provided to you in the university right now, what are you going to do with it? Where are you going to take it? How are you going to let that transform you and your future? And how are you going to use and take advantage of it right now? So my learnings over the years, from having not much money to actually getting to a point where my family are comfortable, and I am extraordinarily grateful every day. When I get out of bed in the morning, the first thing I do is I remember to be thankful that my family are well and healthy. I remember to be grateful that I get an opportunity to work in a company like Flex. I've been there for 20 years, so it's a big part of my family. I spend 60 and 70% of my waking hours there. And I am grateful for the opportunity to be here with you all today. And when I go to bed at night, I again try and remind myself. And it's actually, I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, a part of it is brain training yourself to remember that there's a level of humility, regardless of where you are in life right now, to be inclusive of others, but also to be grateful for what you have and take the opportunity to be able to remind yourself about the next phase of your development and what you can do. What have I learned? I don't worry about the fear. I've spent a lot of my time scared. I'm a bit nervous actually coming in here today thinking, okay, how will you guys and gals receive me? But that's okay, it's normal. Fear is good, it raises up the adrenaline level. You get to actually do a little bit more, it gives you energy. But don't worry about it, don't sweat it. Don't take stuff home. You know, things will happen. Things will go wrong. An exam won't go too well. A project won't go too well. A boyfriend and girlfriend will split up. These things happened. So, you know, from your perspective, recycle it, learn from it, and move on. And don't beat yourself up. It happens. And never in your career, your network will be the most valuable thing you'll ever have in your industry. Treat it with respect and with the value it deserves. And as you come across people and you go out into the world and you go do your summer jobs and you get into working with Flex or working with other companies, nurture that network, because in 20 years' time, it will be hugely valuable to you. And if you take nothing else from today, take that. Nurture your network, treat it with respect, and stay in touch. It will absolutely pay off in dividends for you. And to me, these are all the things that are important to me in making time for my family, never breaking a family engagement. Now, I will miss birthdays, but I will be very upfront and say I won't be home. Here's my schedule for the year. But when I've made a commitment to be there, I will be there. Assume it's your job as you climb towards this. I love the idea of envisaging where you want to go next, and I've done it my entire life. I remember buying our first home, and I live in Ireland, by the way. My first home I bought 30 years ago, and it cost me £32,000, punt we used to call it. which is about the equivalent of $40,000. And at that time, that was, in my world, a fortune. I had been saving a pension, which I sold, which gave me the deposit. And then we worked a few jobs and paid our mortgage and eventually got the house paid for. The sense of pride and ownership I had in this tiny cottage. It was 1.5 bedrooms, I would say, and it had a kitchen cum dining room with a tiny open fireplace, and I loved it. I still have it today. And I have an elderly friend of mine living in it, which is great to see. It's a beautiful little cottage. It was built in 1720. But the point is, couldn't afford it, set my eyes on the task, figured out a way to do it, and actually brought it back. And that to me was envisaging about what I needed and what I had to have and where I needed to go. And it's equally about in your world of whether it is in the academic world or whether you move into the technology world or in the business world. When you're looking for your next step, when you want to go a particular direction with your job and you want to get that next promotion, start imagining and envisaging what it feels like to have that job, what it looks like, what the tasks are, and start doing them. And it's incredibly powerful how you eventually find that you actually start accelerating your way into that role. Embrace and lead change when it's necessary, and don't be afraid to try new things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the industry. My presentation is going to jump a little bit about me, so you kind of get to know me, a little bit about our industry and where we work, a little bit about Flex, a little bit about the business unit, and then a little bit about the lessons I've learned through my career inside in Flex. And please feel free to talk to me and ask questions. You're all very familiar with our fourth industrial revolution and the intelligence age. And what we're seeing from a GDP perspective worldwide right now, the IMF just released its most recent report, which is now up to about 3.2, 3.3%. With the emerging economies being about 4% of that, and what we call the advanced economies being just shy of 2%. So that's actually a big lift. We have had, over the last 3 years in particular, a fairly significant hike in valuations in a bear market of everything. A bull market of everything. And a lot of it is being driven in this technology convergence and transformation that we're going through. When we look back, this is a Harvard source. So this is the S&P 500. Back in 1935, a company would have been expected to survive about 100 years in the S&P 500. In 2013, it was down to 15. The latest one that I saw was that by 2020, it's probably 10 or so years in the S&P. Because the rate of change is becoming so fast in technology that your competition is actually that technology change. It really isn't about the competitor base out there that is jockeying for your business today. Your biggest competitive impact will be your inability to keep up with that convergence in technology and what's going on in the industries. And that's where we focus a lot of our effort. This is, again, from Yale University, but I like it a lot. On this white paper that we read, 25% of the brands by 2025 will be known and 75% of them will be unknown. So we kind of think in our world here, when you think about NIO, the latest automotive company, or you think about Uber, which is an older one, where it takes the San Francisco taxi business out of business. You think about Airbnb today. Airbnb's market cap is largest in the world, and it's not a hotelier compared to the hotelier group. We wouldn't have known that a few years ago. These new brands are going to continue to disrupt and emerge. And that's the world we live in. So network controllers and sensors. I was reading yesterday that the new Airbus has 20,000 sensors in it. So you think about that new aircraft and 20,000 sensors, and that's just the start in one aircraft alone. And actuators, and we do a lot in the sensor and actuator world, and Flex are about to be embedded, or are being embedded actually, in any tangible object or place to control the real world. And you think about here, I don't know if anybody's seen this before, 16 million text messages, 4.1 million videos viewed, 342,000 apps downloaded. In what time frame? Anybody want to take a guess, hazard a guess? Well done, there you go, close enough, 60 seconds. Actually, because the last time I asked this, I spoke at some event a few weeks back. Mind you, the audience was significantly older than you. It was like a 24-hour period, but in 60 seconds, and that's just stunning. And that's today, right now. I'm pretty excited about that because my world is all about providing the infrastructure that drives all the fiber optics and speed and technologies that will enable this. I love this. I read it online recently, and it was about ask good questions, and it's back to the educational system. And really what it talks to is when we move forward, where we look at artificial intelligence, we look at what's happening in the online world, where all information is immediately, readily available to you, where you can go in online and ask a question of Alexa, Siri, whoever it is in the future in that world. Then what changes educationally for us, and what changes in a good business environment for us? And I think this lady wrote this really well, in that it really is about figuring out how to ask the smart questions today. And not as much about the memory recall, memory retention in that environment, but asking the smart questions. Memory recall and memory retention will be incredibly important and valuable going forward, of course. But when you think about an educational system, and we think about the children that are being born this year and what they're going to move in towards, this actually becomes an interesting piece to ponder. A little about Flex. We're a $25 billion company. We've been in existence since 1980. We have 12 different segments. These are my 3 that I run down here. We also have global services that's not up here. So we do medical devices. We do catheters. We do all of diabetes diagnostics. In automotive, we have probably, in each car that's shipped, about $125 of equipment is built by Flex. In sensors, actuators, in infotainment type systems, in brake control. In our industrial world, we do a lot in Intel side and the applied materials side, where we build out all that semiconductor type equipment. We do home appliances, white good, brown goods, capital equipment. We do energy, solar panels, solar trackers. We do lighting, LED systems. In our mobile world, anything that you can carry that is Wi-Fi, Zigbee 3.0 enabled, we build. Connected living, which is all around the experience in the home. And then we have a whole host of wearables, so your Fitbits down to your embedded technologies, wearable, stretchable technologies that are embedded, monitoring heartbeat, monitoring all of your vitals is actually designed and done by Flex today. And then we have our telecommunications, which is your large towers that actually manage all the infrastructure, the networking part back into that, and of course, finally, the cloud, edge computing, and enterprise business groups. What's valuable about this for us when I think through it, and what is a unique advantage, is that I can go work with my colleagues over in automotive, and I can go bring my compute building bricks, my compute building blocks, and all of that capability together to actually create a solution for autonomous driving. And when we look at what's happening in the 5G network and trying to reduce that latency down to less than 7 milliseconds, we're actually building that 4.5G, 5G in our lab today. And then we have the compute and building bricks, and then we also know how to actually do a 0 defect per million in our automotive world. So threading those pearls of technology competencies and engineering and manufacturing experiences allow us and enable us to create a whole new industry sector for Flextronics, and to be able to flex and be able to expand our TAM and solve really complex problems for the industry. That's not easy to do, but it's a very unique place that we live in, because there isn't any other company in the world that is actually building for base stations, building optical componentry today, building compute building blocks and edge compute gateways, and building automotive or medical devices or connected living devices. So it's actually a hugely powerful position, and we'll continue to expand our TAM. This is my business group. It's about $8.5 billion. We do business with every major player across the world. I can't think of a single logo that we're not engaged with today. So we design product from reference architectures from Intel, Cavium, Broadcom. We manufacture that product, we co-develop it for solutions in the CSP, the world, or in the telecommunications world, or in the compute world, and then we deliver that to market as a solution. And I love this quote from Jack Welch. This industry has shifted so significantly in the past 5 years, it's astounding. And for Flex and me and our business group, our challenge has been, how do you ensure that you continue to change your investments, that you continue to change your R&D portfolios and your go-to-market business models to stay relevant in it? And if the rate of change outside my house is faster than what's going on inside my Flex house, then the end is near indeed. And I think it's a great, powerful quote for us to remember. I'm not going to go through this deal. What I am going to tell you is that in the traditional market, about $50 billion of that market has been ceded to a social network company, a search engine company, and a software company. And if you had gone back 10 years ago and asked if we thought Google, Facebook, and Microsoft and Amazon, a retail firm, would own the cloud data center, I think when you would have asked all of the big traditional guys, they would have said, hell no. And this has been driven by open sharing of architectures, your open standards in the OCP world, Open Compute Platforms, the Open 19 world. Now moving into the telecommunications world, which is, of course, the central office re-architected data centers. And that's going to be the next world that will actually change here. A $50 billion market growing to 75 has emerged as a result of what's being driven here, which is quite fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about strategy. Alice in Wonderland, as you guys know, would you please ask me which way I ought to go from here? The cat says, well, very much depends on where you want to get to. I don't know. Well, then it actually doesn't matter. It's a very powerful little lesson when it comes to the strategy. You actually need to know where you want to get to. And then you need to figure out what those building blocks look like as you try and drive that forward. And this is our industry. Back in 2014, it would have been based on proprietary silicon. You had the social network company, the search engine company, the retail company move into the world, and they drove a lot of the commodity hardware. And now you have a whole convergence going on in this industry where we're providing some of that technology to these companies. And that's what we were faced with back in 5 years ago. 5G is hugely important, and this is the world I live in, from 5G down into hybrid cloud, public cloud, private cloud. But it's entirely relevant to the rest of what's going on in Industry 4.0, where we look at the 50 billion devices of IoT and the 1.6 trillion economy. But it's incredibly valuable around what we can do in technology. If you think about what IBM Watson is doing right now and the studies and research they've done in oncology and being able to deliver data into the oncologist world at a rate of 30 minutes versus the 160 hours they needed in the past. I mean, that's just incredible, powerful, good use of technology. And when we look at for patients in terms of a hospital critical care patient, when they go through a large operation, 40% of them actually have to come back through the system again. And with the new edge compute devices and gateway hubs and monitoring that we're doing in wearables, we're going to end up with a world where you can actually do a lot of this critical care at home. And people, when they're in their own home environment, recover about 70% better than they do in a hospital environment. So actually, this is hugely valuable around, and not just taking, in Ireland where I come from, the hospitals are still all very much paper-driven. And we're only just now moving into a digital era, and it's going to take another decade. But we can actually start with the home care and the critical home care, including just basic diabetes management and such, which is exciting. Autonomous driving is currently even fast moving into electric vehicles, but more importantly, into a level 3. I'm not sure where autonomous will be by 2025, but we know between level 3 and level 4, you've got to get the latency down on the network anyway. And of course, it presents some ethical questions for us, right? In terms of, okay, so if we're going to go to autonomous driving, and you got the family in the car, so you imagine you're driving down the road, and then a child and a dog come out as a pedestrian, then who gets to override? Which do you save, the family in the car or the child and the dog? And it's like, so these questions will come up more and more. And of course we have to regulate for that, and we have to influence it, and we have to become involved. And I'm sure some of you are active in those consortiums today. And if you're not, I would hope you would. These are our growth strategies: 5G, edge compute, and telco General Cloud, this is what we're doing in the software world. But our portfolio evolution, this is what's happening for us. So we've had, in all of the new areas, when you think about CSP, cloud compute, 37% growth. In our wireless and 5G, moving from 4G into 5G, and optical and networking, a very nice 57% growth. Excuse me. So our strategy is beginning to pay off, which is nice to see. But we had actually a lot of challenges through that. There was a lot of iterations of that strategy. So not everything went nicely from day one. And we continue to have challenges because this industry continues to shift at an unrelenting pace. And we have to keep pace with that or keep ahead of it from a bare building bricks from an engineering perspective for us, and also being able to deliver that to the industry. I like Jim Collins a lot. I like some of his work, but I particularly like this 10Xers around what makes a great and strong leadership team. I often get questioned on the productive paranoia one. The productive paranoia is just about looking ahead to think about what does epic failure look like and what does glorious success look like. And if we hit, what could be a disaster and go wrong for us? And in the event I hit that disaster, what am I going to do next? And just helping you to think through that actually allows you to tweak your strategy to fail-safe your company a bit better. Empirical creativity is hugely valuable. I'm a big data-driven person. I like data a lot. I like going 3 layers deep on my data, but data will only give you 65% of any answer. You actually need to rely on your empirical knowledge and trust the team around you to actually guide that to get to a good decision. And self-discipline is hugely important. Reading a lot, staying up with your technologies, staying up to date with what's going on around the business, really, really is critical. Being consistent. It's back to where I started with family. For me, and in my history, and I am not a young woman anymore, but in my history, the best leaders I've worked with have been the leaders that have been consistent with me, the leaders that have actually challenged me to raise my game. They've been the leaders that have coached and mentored me. They've been the leaders that have never embarrassed me, but they will inquire of something because they know I'm completely off left field and not getting what I need to be doing. But they will use a very smart, soft system of inquiry to actually help me think through where the problem is and actually get to the solution myself. And it's a great teaching methodology as a leader. And it also ensures that you actually keep your whole team intact. And that consistency is very valuable. To me, again, great leadership. Your team will believe and your people will believe they've done it themselves. And that is a fine sign of a very good leader indeed. So my last slide, and we'll stop and talk, I hope, for a little bit. What we learned at play school or kindergarten, I'm not sure, play school is very much an Irish thing for me, but is in this new world, if you think back to my earlier example about where we're going with autonomous, be it in drones, be it in small light aircraft, be it in automobile, industries won't be able to do it alone. You're actually going to have to choose who you're going to network with, because you won't have all of the technology in one area to be able to solve for autonomous. It will require a Ford and AT&T and Flex and perhaps Microsoft getting together as an example of a potential relationship. You think about medical health care, and you think about great companies and companies that have been around for over 100 years, like Johnson & Johnson. Super organizations, but how do they now move into a digital era of analytics-driven bases where they need hardware to actually control that and be able to solution that into an environment? They have to carefully choose a few best friends. And to me, share everything is about building an environment of trust amongst those selected best friends in your industry. So figure out how that works. So who do I need to differentiate going forward in a world where it requires extreme agility, where it requires extreme speed and technology changes and shifts? Who do I need to partner up with me? And then which part of my toys am I going to share with them? I'm not going to share everything. I'm not going to give them all of my IP. That's my differentiating piece. But I am going to share enough where they can be successful and I can be successful, and together we can go to market and actually shift this around. Clean your room. I'm sure you all heard that from your moms many times, your dads. Clean your room for me is about not letting it getting overly complex. More companies die of indigestion than they do of starvation. They actually take on too much and fail because they don't become great in one or two or three things. And so cleaning your room is really about trying to get it in its simplest form, know where you want to go, and actually drive that execution. And then, of course, use your imagination. Back to what we chatted about earlier on, Uber. The taxi firms didn't see it coming. Airbnb, the hotels didn't see it coming. When we think about what's going on with artificial intelligence, what is going to happen to the finance industry? Financial tech, or fintech as we refer to it. China has the largest global investment in fintech today. 3 companies we call BAT, or we refer to as BAT: Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. Superb, awesome companies, and growing at just a phenomenal rate in China today. And when we look at the amount of e-commerce that occurred in the United States during last year, I don't know if anybody wants to hazard a guess what you think that is. It's 120 billion roughly. Big numbers, right? E-commerce. So a lot of personal shopping. Usually it's the individual online buying at Amazon and so on and so forth. Anybody want to hazard a guess what that spent in China and their record of e-commerce last year in the same period? It was 8.6 trillion. So think about that in terms of the speed at which they're moving. Now, you also have to remember population is 301.3 roughly in terms of comparable. But the ecosystem and the fintech ecosystem that's getting built out in China today is staggering. There are businesses using online retail. It is business to business. It's not just the consumer into retail shopping. And it really has evolved through there. Of course, the United States, and in particular Silicon Valley, leads the augmented reality, virtual reality, autonomous driving, but China's a close second. So there's a very large world out there is the point of that message. So you should keep in touch with what's going on with new companies such as NEO that just moved into the valley here. It's a Chinese-backed firm. Stunning what they've achieved already. Keep in touch with what's going on in China. Keep in touch with what Prime Minister Modi is doing in India. What's going on in Europe? What are the new upcoming trends in technology and companies? It is really very valuable to make sure that you try and understand that and not lose sight and get cocooned in one particular geo, because if we do, we will actually lose sight and get overtaken and get ourselves distracted with other things while someone creeps up and takes your market share and takes your opportunity. So thank you very much. That was really my last slide, I believe. And if you'd like to throw it open for questions, if I may, is that all right?
Absolutely. All right, so I can imagine we have got a few questions out there. Please raise your hand down in front.
Hi.
Hey.
With regards to sensors being integrated into everyday devices, because we keep hearing things like the network's growing and that we're creating a virtual model of the world. Do you think that, and it's true that we are living our lives increasingly through the virtual world, but do you think privacy concerns and increased reliance on artificial intelligence will become a limiting factor on the exponential growth that we've seen in industry and technology, and perhaps become an Achilles heel of the human race?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, thank you. So the question is about privacy control and also the use of artificial intelligence. If it, because of regulatory, will it become something that we should consider in the future? So privacy control for me is something that I'm actually near and dear to my heart. I actually believe in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, in 10 years for sure, each one of us will actually have a digital image of ourselves. So if you think today, on average, when we look at the cell towers and you think about your AT&T plan or whatever plan you're on average, you have 2 devices connected, and that's just in the United States. So on average, everybody has 2 devices connected. So when we look forward to the sensors connected to your laundry machine, washing machine thingy, and your car, and your refrigerator, and all of the other, as we imagine that connected living smart world, that goes from 2 to 150. That actually is creating an extraordinary digital image of who you are. And I'm a believer that you actually own all of that data associated with it, that it doesn't belong to a CSP, it doesn't belong to a retailer, it doesn't belong to anyone other than the individual. And I actually would encourage us all to ensure that we're influencing that digital image of ourselves remains ours from a privacy perspective. While saying that, it's really a very aspirational goal. The reality is that when you look at all of us ticking yes to the terms and conditions we never read, including myself, we've obviously given away some of those rights already, and you can obviously pull that back and back out of it. But government and business have to come together to regulate for privacy. In the EU, we have very stringent privacy laws, even to the point where, so my employees in Sweden, or my employees in Germany, my employees in Ireland, I actually cannot share out their salaries to our global HR team. So we cannot have one single system because the EU won't allow it. They will not allow that interchange of information. And there's a huge part of me, while it's awkward from an international business perspective, for just that simple little thing, it's awkward, but I actually prefer it because it does protect and manage the individual. And we all know the level of cyber attacks are continuing to increase and increase. And our new world really needs to be, even if it's encrypted, simple Wi-Fi device in your home, the fact that it's encrypted still doesn't ensure that it's protecting your data. And it's because of the multi-point to points that we're now going to have in our home devices that actually is going to challenge us in a fairly significant way. The US are actually putting a lot of money behind that to ensure that from a cybersecurity perspective that we continue to lead the world. The EU has added another, $4.5 billion out over the next few years as well, which is great. I can't remember what the Asian market is investing, but surely they are doing the same thing, and that's a good thing. But it shouldn't be up to government to regulate alone. Business and individuals need to influence what that regulation should look like, and that's not a flex opinion, by the way, that's a personal Caroline opinion. I hope that answers your question.
Other questions? In the front?
Yes, so I saw on your website that you do, and also on your slideshows as well, that you have this sort of sketch to scale approach. Can you please explain that?
Sure, absolutely. We've grown out of a world where we would have designed product and manufactured product for Cisco, for Johnson & Johnson, for BMW, so on and so forth. And it would have been based off what we would have called, or what I would refer to, a prescription. They would have actually told us what to do. Here's what we would like this product to look like. Here's what this product needs to perform to. Here's how you manufacture it, and so on and so forth. So 30 years ago, and 20 years ago, and 15 years ago, and even 10 years ago, that was exactly what we were doing. Over the last decade, and in particular the last 5 years, as we move into a software-defined world and a virtualized world, companies are way more focused on their software layer and being able to drive that. And they're asking us, and depending on us, to show up and be able to take a product from concept, a napkin sketch, all the way through to actual installation for them. And that's what we have been doing. And when you look at our portfolio as a company, the 25 billion I talked to earlier, we've gone from our 2015, which is we had about 10% of our portfolio in what we would call sketch to scale, which is that napkin all the way through to delivering a final end product, to this year will be about 30%, going into 40 to 45% by fiscal 20. So over half of our company, or close to half of our company, will flip to be a design and engineering-led initiative where it's our system architects, it's our BIOS engineers are actually solving for a particular environment versus, yes, please.
So basically, in
Mm-hmm.
and then that client hires Flex to manufacture the product, and then
To design it. So the client will have an idea. They'll say, so